part. But if you look at it today, the market for these tools, Asia Pac is leading, much more than any of the other regions. Asia Pac buys more of these products, these tool sets which are required, right, in manufacturing. So that's a significant change there. And the last one is around easy replication of manufacturing process. So, the study says there are 3 things which are required, and we all can relate to that. In order to have a good manufacturing setup, you need infrastructure, you need policy support from the government, and then you need talent. So 3 things which are essential. So if you have that, you could move manufacturing from any place to that place, right, very easily. So, and we're seeing that happening. We see lots of it, and the way China has grown, the way India is growing. So these are all clear indications of how you could move manufacturing, easily replicate things which happen elsewhere. So some illustration to kind of validate what I stated so far, and also in the study. This is out of the study in some ways. So if you look at it many years ago, this is how a typical supply chain would be. The company would be headquartered in the US, R&D there, component manufacturers within the same country, and then consumers are there. Right? Typically, this is how the companies started. And if you look at Eaton in the early 90s, that's how we were. Most of it was US-centric. So what all this, the big shift has led us is to a disaggregated supply chain. Right? You could see in this chart, essentially, what was primarily in North America, right, it's become truly global. So you could have, while the headquarters in the US, you could have R&D facilities elsewhere. You could have suppliers, anywhere in the world. Consumers are pretty much around the globe. So this is the disaggregation which has happened because of these trends. And if I were to compare it with Eaton in 2000, our headquarters is in Cleveland. We have regional headquarters in Shanghai, March, Switzerland, and Brazil, innovation centers in many places. So this kind of lends to this trend which has happened in what we're seeing in the marketplace, in the globe. So this is your example, right? If you take the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, which was launched last year, these are all the parts which go into this aircraft, and you can see it is coming from different parts of the world, different companies supplying it. Yeah, US, Australia, Asia, and Europe. That's how the Dreamliner is put together. And if you really look at it, 287 suppliers across 22 countries. Right? Pretty phenomenal. Now, I just wanted to give this context also, since we are in India, lots of things happening. I just want to give, this is again from the study, very, very quickly. This is the pre-licensed Raj, and then this is after that when the reform started. And I just want to talk about this way forward out here. If you look at it, the manufacturing policy was drafted last year, and if you look at it, the goal is to get to 25% of GDP by 2022. Right? That's a tall order. I mean, we are right now hovering around 12–13%. So it really requires action to make it happen in India. But at least we have a framework which is there, but it's a matter of the will to go make it happen. And it please the way business operate in India, and also the infrastructure which is needed. Talent is there. I think it's a given in India. It's not an issue. It's more around infrastructure and some of the policy framework. So I just want to relate. I want you guys to have that as the background in your mind, and then now talk about what is the manufacturing ecosystem which we have here, and how we what is of relevance. So if you look at it, this is the complete ecosystem, the common forces, capability, market, and the resources, right? So my focus today, and I think that's the only thing I am familiar with to talk about is around the capabilities associated with the innovation technology process, and to a certain extent about talent. Right. So I think that's relevant for us to discuss, and I think I can't comment on the other pieces, but this is what I'm taking from the ecosystem and kind of dive deeper. Any questions so far?
Do we ask questions now, or would you prefer? Can you go back to slide number 4? I'll be honest. I'm not read up too much on the big shift.
Okay.
Methodology, but when we look at this slide itself, isn't it a paradox? I mean, on one side you're saying that the proprietary knowledge is kind of not going to be as prevalent, whereas you're focusing on innovations. So how do you work on your innovations, and where does IP fall?
Yeah. So if you look at the open source trend which we see out there, right? A lot of things which are important, and you see the notion of co-creation which exists out there.
Sure.
Right? And sure, companies will have to have their own USP, and they'll have to innovate, right? But that's not the only way. The way to get there are many different ways to achieve that. The learnings which come out of the network effect, partnering with the members of the ecosystem, all this I think is becoming, in the past, the infrastructure was not out there, the things which enable that kind of an interaction was not there. Now those things are in place, right? It makes it easy to go ahead and do those kinds of co-creation and partnering across the globe to make things happen. So innovation, in certain ways, there will be aspects which are very proprietary. The message here is, while that played a significant role for companies in the past, it is important, but the way you achieve that would be in a different fashion. Yeah. So this is the study, and to a certain extent, to a great extent, I agree with what they're saying, but these are things which are predictions in some way for the future, but I thought I'll leave that as a thought for you guys to think further on that. But there's lots of study out there and knowledge of work and what they do.
So your I guess core competency is IT, right? So
right.
I'm assuming that if you draw a parallel between this and open source, yes, open source has demonstrated that there's tremendous value in that whole thing, and
right.
we've seen it over the past few years. But have you seen that kind of I guess open source methodologies being used in manufacturing?
So I'm going to talk about a couple of examples later on in the presentation, which I think are opportunities for this group, and some of the things which we are seeing can help, right? So early days, but definitely I think there's opportunities there. So to take the conversation further, I thought I'll talk about a thing which I'm familiar with. I've not been in manufacturing until I joined Eden, right? Let me state that out here. I was in the software space doing all kinds of things in the internet, in the financial services world before I moved to manufacturing. So that is a background, but I just want to present what I see are the major attributes of a diversified industrial. And it's like Eden company, lots of companies out there. So one of the things is growing and demanding customer base, which you all agree. Customers are becoming more savvy, they are well informed, and the kinds of things which they demand are increasing every day. And typically any of these companies are serving customers around the globe. And from the trend we can see that. So it is not customer which is just where you are located. And typically any of these companies would have a very large product and service portfolio. And as I mentioned, there are teams to support that, and these teams are located across the globe, and they interact in many ways. And also, there's a great deal of customization, localization, which is happening, and which I'll talk about a little later, which becomes an important aspect of the companies which are entering emerging markets. And the diversity in customer and supplier touch points. Just as we saw, Boeing required more than 200 suppliers, right, and their customers around the globe. So it becomes pretty diverse in terms of the interactions, and over all these interactions, we want to make sure that it's reliable and we're able to support those kinds of interactions. And the other thing which is still on, though there are some hiccups, is around the growth in emerging markets. All these companies are betting big in opportunities which are happening. I mean, that's another thing which came out of that study is the shift is creating new markets, right, which in the past did not exist, right? New models, new markets. So, what are some of the business challenges, right, in this kind of an environment? Typically, the companies grow organically and inorganically. Any of this diversified industrial, that's typically the model in which they grow. And the alignment with business goals, these are things which, I don't have to preach to this group out here, but you're very familiar with the kinds of challenges. But the key thing is it becomes more complicated when the company is diversified, and it has a setup which is very global. The need for speed. Anytime you go, the perception out there for an IT organization is it always takes a long time before these guys can get something done. Right? So it's true in the manufacturing world. I mean, if I were to compare my previous experience more lately around the startup and Yahoo, 6 months is a lifetime for those companies. If you don't get a product out in 6 months, you're dead. But if you look at in the manufacturing space, it's long lead. It takes a long time, a few years sometimes to get these products out, and it changes by industry. If you go to the construction, if you go to oil and gas, very long, right? But at the same time, the need is to deliver stuff faster. Right? How can you compress the time in getting these things to market? So it exists. While it is very obvious in the new age technology companies, but it is also becoming more and more relevant in the manufacturing space. The other is ease of doing business. What this essentially means is, IT typically is like a black box most of the time. I mean, it is our opportunity to go and make that easier for people to comprehend and understand and relate to how it's going to help the business, and to that extent to be able to do business in this environment where we have a number of suppliers and vendors. Obviously, the other things are all very relevant in a manufacturing space. Reducing the cost continues to be there. Product quality, which is pretty significant, especially the products which come out of these companies are out there for years together. I mean, if you talk about the Dreamliner, these are things which you can't compromise on, right, in terms of quality. So it's pretty high, right? You also have to overcompensate stuff, so if something fails, there's something else which will take care of it. Then with the proliferation globally, right, every country has its own laws, regulations. So non-conformance becomes a big issue. So you have to put things in place to reduce the gaps which exist in that space. And obviously safety, zero incident, zero defects culture, these are typical in any manufacturing, whether it is in India, China, the US, very high in terms of what the demands are. Last but not the least, with the IP stuff, security is a very important aspect, especially in emerging markets. So, I talked about the capability around innovation,